Annotated bibliographies, what they are, why to use them, and how to write one. So what are annotated bibliographies? Let's break down the actual term here, starting with bibliography. What's a bibliography? Well, if you think back to earlier on in the semester, a bibliography is simply a list of sources. That's it. That's all it is. And then think about, what does it mean to annotate something? The other word in the title of this assignment. Well, it may be a term that you're familiar with from high school, maybe not, but to annotate something simply means to make notes on the document itself, so you're writing things down on it. So to put it all together, an annotated bibliography is simply a list of sources with notes added. But specifically, what's in one? Because it is a little bit more formal than just scribbling down notes on a list. For each of the sources in the bibliography, okay, you're going to have a few different parts. The first thing is you're going to have, in the case of our class, an MLA-styled works cited entry. So you're going to have the official documentation of the source. Then underneath that, you're going to have a paragraph about the type of source that it is and its credibility. So a little bit of a description about the source itself. Then you're going to have a paragraph summary of the key points that are connected to your topic. So what do you pull out of the essay that's important, that's related to what you're researching? If there are things in your source that aren't connected to your topic, you don't have to summarize them here, because this is a annotated bibliography specifically for your research. And then the last paragraph is going to contain your thoughts about the source. And I'll get into that a little bit more specifically. But note that the exact details that are added in the annotations will vary depending on what you're writing the bibliography for, what the purpose of it is, or who's asking you to complete it. In this case, I'm asking you to write one that's specifically designed to be helpful when you go to write your paper later on. There's a couple different other purposes that annotated bibliographies are used in scholarly work that I'm not going to get into right now. We're just going to focus on this main idea. So why use them? Well, the form that we're writing about is an easy way to organize your notes on your sources. It gets the works cited entry out of the way right in the beginning, so you're just going to be able to copy and paste that into your final document and not have to think about it when you come time to write your paper. It keeps all your information about your sources in one place. So again, organization, key. And ultimately, it'll help you save time when you go to write the paper. And I'll show you how to use it later on in the semester when we get to that point of actually drafting things. Another purpose of annotated bibliographies is people who are writing like dissertations, big, long, 300-page works will often actually even publish their annotated bibliography to let people know what their research looks like, how thorough they research things, all the different topics that they looked at in the process of completing their paper. It gives a little bit of insight into the research process of the person writing the paper, and that can actually be really helpful to scholars. So you can see, especially that idea of what thoughts they had about each of the papers. So how to write one? Let's go in and actually look at a sample of one, again connected to my Cinderella essay, to kind of see the process and see what I mean and how to put this together. Here we have my completed sample annotated bibliography, which actually only has 2 sources on it, but it's enough to give you a sense of what I'm talking about. I'll also post the sample bibliography on Blackboard so that you can look at it as a model. So first, let's break down the works cited entry here for my first source. I have the author's last name, so her name is Sheila Rusnick O'Brien, so O'Brien, Sheila Rusnick, period. Then I have the title of the actual source, it's the article itself, and if you remember, this is actually one that I showed you in the video last week. So Disney's Cinderella, Undercover, Heads, Butts, Toads, and Gender Woes. There's a period, and since it's the title of an article, it goes in quotation marks. Next up, the title of the journal, and that is Studies in American Humor, and since that's the publication title, that goes in italics. Then I have the publisher, which is the American Humor Studies Association, And since this is a journal, there is a volume and an issue number. So that's what comes next, volume 3, number 1, comma, the date of publication. And then because it's a journal and I'm just looking at one article from that journal, I have PP for pages and the page numbers which the article appears on. Now, because I got this from a database, I got this from JSTOR, which I mentioned last week. You may be using the library database in order to do the research, and so then it's going to be through the library database, as I showed you in the video about finding peer-reviewed sources. So here you have a second container, so the title of the website or the database where you found and got access to this particular article, because you didn't go out and buy this journal. Okay, so that's JSTOR in this case, comma, and then the website, the web address of the place where I found the article. This is the stable web address, and that's something that the database is actually going to give you. Then period, and then just the information of when I accessed the database, accessed 28 October 2020, period. So now we'll get into the actual article itself, or annotated bibliography itself. In this first paragraph, I explain that it's a scholarly article published in a peer-reviewed journal, so I found that out through my research process. I also did a little bit of research on the author herself. I did a quick Google search to find her and found out that she's an assistant professor for English and American Studies at the University of Idaho, and that she's published multiple books on American literature and humor and is considered one of the experts in her field. So that's my first paragraph talking about the credentials of the source. It's perfectly okay in your annotated bibliography to write that you're not sure how trustworthy a source is, or if you feel that it's really biased, because those sources can still be helpful in different ways in writing your paper. The key is that you're directly addressing the issues or potential issues with the source. And we'll talk about how to deal with that in your paper later on. So then I go on to give a quick summary. This article discusses how details removed from the heroines, yet exaggerated in the other characters, creates a sexualized difference between the two. This is what this essay was talking about. You can go into a lot more detail in your summary if you want to put in if you have a lot of notes on a topic, go ahead and put them into your annotated bibliography, because like I explained, this can be a resource to keep everything together. I did a really quick version here just to shorten the video and keep things moving. I did decide here to include a quote. The key with the summary is that the majority of it should be in your own words, but if there is something that really stands out, you can go ahead and quote it in your annotated bibliography. Make sure you're using signal phrases though, and if you don't remember what those are or need a refresher, you can go back to the how-to videos folder in our course in Blackboard and review the signal phrases video. But in essence, a signal phrase is just this: the overall effect, O'Brien argues. That's introducing who is saying this quotation. And since in my paragraph above I've already given some credentials and told you who O'Brien is, I don't have to introduce her more than that. So the overall effect, O'Brien argues, is that in Cinderella, Disney crafted, quote, a film that offers viewers clear directional signals concerning what is and what is not acceptable gender behavior, while cloaking their conceptions in a seemingly innocuous format. End quote. I have page numbers because this is from a journal where the version that I looked at online had the page numbers printed on it, so I include the page number that quotation appeared on and a period afterwards. And then my third paragraph goes on to explain my thoughts, my reaction to this source. And so I explain that this fits in with my hypothesis that perfect heroines are innocent or sexually pure, while the mature, independent, and possibly sexually provocative women are portrayed as evil in Disney films. That's something I kind of developed through my observations. It provides a contrast to McCloud's theory that cartoons with less details allow the audience to more easily project themselves into a particular character. So that's a reference to another one of my sources. I don't have to explain that more here in my annotation because I'm going to talk about his source in another spot in my annotated bibliography. But then I can go on to say, in fact, the removal of details, these are my thoughts again, when juxtaposed with exaggerated details and other characters, may actually alienate some audience members from the heroine when they realize they are far more like the other characters, than the leading lady. Then I skip a space just for ease of looking at it in this case, and then I have the Scott McCloud source. So McCloud Scott, which is Understanding Comics, The Invisible Art, is the title of the book, because in this case it's a book, the publisher, and the date of publication, which is all the information that I need to include in a works cited entry if I'm just talking about the book overall. So here I go through and again give a little bit of background on who Scott McCloud is, and then I go on to summarize quickly. And in this case, it's a long book. There's lots of different parts to it that are really fascinating and interesting, but this is the only key part that I'm actually really looking for in connection to the topic that I'm writing my paper on. So I just summarize that in a little bit more detail. And then again, I go on to include my thoughts and my reaction to this, what I think about it, how I respond to it, if I agree, if I disagree with it. And that's the idea of how you put together your annotated bibliography. In the end, if you want to go through and alphabetize them as you would a works cited list based on what comes first in the works cited entry, you can go ahead and do that. If you don't want to take the time and extra effort here, that's fine for the annotated bibliography for this assignment. If you were writing a formal one that was going to be published, it would have to be alphabetized. I'll spare you guys having to do that here. And if you have any questions at all, please don't hesitate to reach out and ask me.